Speaking of a massive negative to the overall brand, the NBA, the other big story we are tracking, the NBA is at a crisis moment here with their response to the China situation. They didn't handle things well last week. Most players stayed quiet, didn't say anything remotely intelligent or unintelligent, unlike Steve Kerr, who looked like an idiot when he decided to comment. But this has turned into an absolute disaster for the NBA because last night LeBron James decided to weigh in, and frankly, he sounded like an imbecile. If you haven't heard it already, here's LeBron discussing Daryl Morey's tweet and effectively telling him to shut up and general manage. There was no reason in LeBron James's mind for Daryl Morey to say that he supported democracy in Hong Kong.
We all talk about this freedom of speech. Yes, we all do have freedom of speech, but at times there are ramifications for the negative that can happen when you're not thinking about others and you're only thinking about yourself. So I don't want to get a word or sentence feud with Daryl Morey, but I believe he wasn't educated on the situation at hand, and he spoke, and so many people could have been harmed, not only financially but physically, emotionally, spiritually. So just be careful what we tweet and we say and what we do, even though, yes, we do have freedom of speech, but there can be a lot of negative that comes with that too.
What an idiot. I mean, we broke this down in hour 2. I would encourage you to go listen to the podcast. I took every sentence that LeBron said and pointed out why he was an imbecile, and his arguments made absolutely no sense. But essentially it boils down to this. LeBron James was furious when he was told, when he weighed in on politics, shut up and dribble. And he said, I'm not going to shut up and dribble. I'm more than an athlete. I won't be silenced. And he is arguing here for Daryl Morey to shut up and general manage. The difference is LeBron stepped into politics in a contentious American political process and has gone after, for instance, Donald Trump. You can agree or disagree with Donald Trump, but half of the people basically in this country agree with him, half of the people disagree. That's where we are as a politics. We're a 50-50 nation. So when you step into American political discourse, you should expect to get roughed up in exchange. That's how the marketplace of ideals works. You don't just get to give your opinion and get praised for it. That's what LeBron has gotten used to because the sports media is a bunch of sycophants and they just follow him around praising everything LeBron says. When he actually realized that people were going to criticize him, he got upset and was unhappy. But the difference here is Daryl Morey didn't step into a highly politicized political era and decide to take the side of a Democrat or a Republican. He took the sides of Democrats and Republicans everywhere, which is democracy as an ideal that should be supported by American citizens around the world. This wasn't some controversial political stand. Daryl Morey didn't come out and say, on behalf of the Houston Rockets, I believe that abortion should be illegal, or abortion should be legal and even more popular than it is now, or we should take all guns and melt them, or everybody should have a gun. He didn't step into a highly charged American partisan arena and pick one side. He stepped into a major geopolitical confrontation with China, a communist dictatorship, and said, I support the democratic protesters in Hong Kong who are merely seeking to have the same rights that American citizens take for granted. And LeBron James said that he was uneducated, Daryl Morey was, and also said there are downsides to the First Amendment. Yes, for instance, LeBron, one of the downsides to the First Amendment is the First Amendment does not protect you from being exposed as to be an idiot, as you were yesterday after deciding to say what you said, despite having a week to come up with something remotely intelligent. You were unable and incapable of doing so. This, to me, should end any argument about LeBron James being smart outside of basketball. He is a good basketball player. He is a smart basketball player. That does not translate into other arenas of life. If you doubted me, just go listen to how dumb LeBron sounded just in that limited 1-minute clip attempting to address the China political crisis after having a week to think about what he was going to say. Danny G, when you saw this, your reaction was what?
What a tough 5 or 6 days for LA sports. Dodgers melting down, Rams and Chargers basically hosting Niner and Steeler home games, and then LeBron sticks his foot in his mouth. And by the way, this is the first time I've ever seen 100% of Twitter agree with you. I literally scrolled through every comment, and there was not one person disagreeing with your viewpoint on this, which was kind of scary, actually, but just points to what a duh moment for him yesterday. I hate what he said. Obviously, I like watching him play basketball. I've always loved watching LeBron play basketball. I appreciate his charity work in Ohio and California. But he could have gained so many fans yesterday had he just said something like, I believe in freedom of speech for all people. You know, my shoes will not be made in China anymore. They're going to be made in the U.S. from now on. If I ever go back to China, it's going to be to help social equality there. I felt guilty being in a 5-star hotel while some protesters in Hong Kong were laying on the street bleeding. Drop the mic. Adam Silver had apologized for Morey's tweet, but then said, the NBA, though, we can comment on anything we want and it's okay. So what ramifications would LeBron have had he come out and taken a stance against what's going on?
All financial. I mean, this is what this is about. LeBron James is trying to make sure that Space Jam 2 gets in Chinese theaters, and as a result, he is carrying the water of a brutal Chinese dictatorship.
Well, how's he going to take on the Monstars if he can't even take on social inequality?
I mean, he is a huge hypocrite. And as I said earlier in hour 2, I think the real story here is he's not even smart enough to realize what a hypocrite he is, because he had a week to think about this on a deep level. This is not some situation where something happens and immediately LeBron James has to comment on it. He had a week. He probably had an entire PR team that worked with him. I'm sure Nike did, because they want to make sure they can continue to sell his shoes in China. I'm sure they all sat down and talked with him and tried to get him to a point where he could address this in a reasonably intelligent level. And they failed on every level because, again, LeBron James was so outraged when he was told to shut up and dribble. And yet he's telling Daryl Morey to do that exact thing. And he's telling him, and LeBron, remember, nobody told LeBron to shut up and dribble about if he had come out and said, hey, I'm in favor of democracy around the world. I'm in favor of free public education. I believe everybody should have the ability to have clean drinking water, right? Like, those are the kind of things that, to me, are completely non-controversial, right? LeBron James could come out and say, hey, I think cancer's bad. That's what saying democracy is good is to me. It's the equivalent of saying cancer is bad. There's nobody out there in America, I don't believe, at least not anybody with a functional brain, who should be opposed to more democracy around the world. People having the right to choose their leaders and having a voice in their country's future is a good thing, whether you live in America or you live in Timbuktu, or whether you live in Ethiopia or whether you live in Germany. Wherever around the world you will happen to be, democracy is a good thing. And I consider what Daryl Morey said to be the equivalent of saying cancer is bad. In other words, virtually everyone agrees with it. But LeBron is opposed to Daryl Morey saying that because it threatens him financially in China. And my point is, at this juncture in his life, has LeBron not reached the point where he's made so much money that he can't afford to actually endorse democracy around the world because he wants to make a little bit more money off of a communist dictatorship in China? And as a result, that he's willing to sell his soul in exchange for being the mouthpiece of a communist dictator government, because that's what he was last night, and that's what he's become. It's really pretty pathetic. Dub, what did you think when you saw this last night?
Well, my first thought was yikes, because he just dug himself into an even bigger hole. And the thing that stood out to me the most was his comments about Daryl Morey not being educated, because probably in all of professional American sports, there may not be a more educated person in general than Daryl Morey. You already stated his degrees from Northwestern and MIT, and obviously, yeah, that doesn't make him an expert on anything. But if I were betting money on who maybe the smartest person in American sports is, I might have to put my money on Daryl Morey. So I thought that was kind of a ridiculous comment as well.
Yeah, saying that the guy who went to Northwestern and MIT is uneducated is, first of all, ridiculous, especially when you didn't even get to college at all. You graduated from high school and probably, let's be honest, didn't have to work that hard in that high school because you were so good at basketball. So you graduate from high school as a general rule. Now, there are some people who obviously don't go to college and are brilliant and don't need college, or go to college and drop out, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, and have tremendous success. But in a general debate, if you had to put money on who knows more about the situation in China, a high school graduate in America or a Northwestern and MIT grad, who do you think better understands the complexities of American foreign policy as it pertains to China? You would probably make the Northwestern and MIT grad a minus 1,000 favorite, maybe a minus 10,000 favorite. So of all the things that LeBron could say, suggesting that this is a complex issue, the same thing, by the way, that Steve Kerr said, is insanely dumb. I mean, just really, really, really dumb. And I think he's exposed himself. But I want to read something to kind of contextualize this LeBron statement and what he did by effectively endorsing a communist Chinese country. Many of you out there who are listening to us right now across all 50 states and around the world, because I know a lot of soldiers stream Fox Sports Radio to be in touch with with local sports. You understand much better than the average person who is living in the United States does about all the rights that we take for granted. And certainly many of you who are immigrants understand the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, so many of the things that we are born and lived with our entire life that we don't understand how fundamentally important they are. Enes Kanter, who we need to get on the show, we've had him on the show before, is an NBA player who has had major issues with Turkey. And in the wake of LeBron James's comments, many NBA players from foreign countries have been outraged by them. But here's what Enes Kanter tweeted. Haven't seen or talked to my family in 5 years. Jailed my dad. My siblings can't find jobs. Revoked my passport. International arrest warrant. My family can't leave the country. Got death threats every day. Got attacked, harassed. They tried to kidnap me in Indonesia. Freedom is not free. We take it for granted very often in this country. Petros Papadakis joins us now at the Old P on Twitter. And I know you didn't expect to step in right into an element of international intrigue here, but yeah. LeBron is in L.A. now, and he represents for the Lakers a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds. What did you think when you heard his comments basically defending China and calling into question what Daryl Morey had said, which is that he supports democracy essentially around the world, including in China?
Well, I was introduced to the story while putting my kids to bed and seeing your tweet of the guy throwing something on that barbecue and like exploding.
That's such a great gif. Like you're trying, if you haven't seen my Twitter feed, I'm at Clay Travis. One of my friends started using that because you got so many people who think like, hey, I'm going to douse out this fire. and this guy is trying to douse the fire and it just turns up into a huge combustible. That's my immediate reaction when LeBron tried to address China was Adam Silver in the NBA. They're finally back in the United States. They think it's over. And then LeBron just took it to a totally different level.
Yeah, and I am grateful that you read the Enes Kanter tweet before bringing me on, because I need a buffer between me and the Taylor Swift, either that or Eddie. Because I'm not in that bad of a mood when I wake up to talk to you, and then you play that god awful music, and it really does. It ruins my morning.
She's the Beatles of her generation.
Yeah, well, they've covered up her banner at the Kings.
I heard that.
Yes, and her opening SoFi Stadium in Inglewood is probably going to be a curse.
I need to be there.
Like a Druid-level curse. But anyway, this is a big story. What did I think? That was my introduction to it. I was blown away just like everybody else. Like, there's a reason what he said sounded sort of similar, I think, to what Steve Kerr said, because I think those are the talking points that the NBA put out to everybody and then to their most powerful people, which is, I need to educate myself, right? So it's kind of similar wording, saying that Daryl Morey, who went to MIT, is not educated, which is kind of laughable.
Yes.
But I look, I don't really blame anybody for trying to protect their business interests on one hand. We've talked about as it pertains to the NFL.
Yes.
With the military sponsorship. And there's a reason that the NFL doesn't want to piss off the military, partially because they're a gigantic sponsor, and the one thing we all know working in media that sells commercials is you don't like upsetting a sponsor. And China is, I would, and you know these things better than I, like the NBA's biggest sponsor, right? I mean, probably, or one of them, or the one with its biggest potential. So that's, in essence, what they're doing here is protecting a sponsor. But obviously, it touches an emotional hot button for a good reason. And the enormous hypocrisy, I think, that's just obviously recognizable is the not just an athlete sweatshirt and taking all these stances, and Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, in your barber shop, and while your agent is slumped down like a guy in detention. Overall, it reveals an enormous hypocrisy, because you can't have these social stances and all these platforms at home and then act as if you just have no idea what's going on in China, or what has been going on in China for, decades and decades and decades, which is a really tough dictatorship, imperialistic society, all those things you want to say. So I don't think you have to be super educated to know that China is a place where you can't be free, like we are here. I think that's a pretty basic concept for everybody.
Yeah, look, I think you hit on something key, which is I would have had no major issues with the NBA kowtowing to China if they had not attempted to sell us on the idea that we are a woke sports league that's not going to stand for people. Think about what the NBA said in North Carolina, right? Regardless of what you think about transgender rights, there was no situation in North Carolina where people were standing outside of bathrooms checking genitals to make sure people went to the right bathroom, right? I'm not I am all for people being making whatever choice makes them happy in life, right? Whether you're gay, straight, bisexual, transgender, whatever you are, you're a furry, whatever you're into, as long as you're a consenting adult and there are other consenting adults involved, I don't really care at all. More power to you.
Is a furry the same as being transgender?
Well, it's just like something that you're into, right? I'm saying whatever you're into, right?
Well, I wouldn't people whose sexuality, quote unquote, be a certain way or part of their identity. It's not the same as putting on a Mickey Mouse outfit and having sex with your wife while she's dressed like Minnie.
Right, but I'm saying whatever you're into, as long as it's consenting adults. It can be I think most people don't dress up like Mickey and Minnie Mouse and have sex together.
Or Kermit the Frog and Piggy would be interesting.
Or Kermit the Frog and Piggy. Whatever you're into. If it turns your wife
Aquaman
on.
Aquaman and Wonder Woman.
That's kind of hot, I'm going to be honest. But if Kermit the Frog turns your wife on, if
or
your
Batman
wife dressing
and Superman,
up, you know what I saw the other day? It's Halloween. There's a sexy Mr. Rogers costume. I don't know who was out there, and they were like, you know what really turns me on?
I saw it. It's beautiful.
Yeah, she was hot. The sexy Mr. Rogers. If
we could be all inclusive and do Batman and Superman too.
That same thing, right? If you have ever seen Mr. Rogers and thought, you know what this makes me want to do? It makes me want to sleep with a woman who looks like Mr. Rogers. I got no that could be your thing, right? Dress your woman up like Mr. Rogers and you guys go to town. And whatever it is, right? But I think what the NBA said there, I know what the NBA said there, was we are going to interject ourselves into a social issue which is not actually a real issue in North Carolina. And this was my issue with the transgender thing, bathroom law to begin with. It was just a made-up reason for Republicans and Democrats to fight because there was nobody standing outside of North Carolina bathrooms like checking to see whether or not you were male or female before you entered the bathroom. The rule has been for my entire life, and you know this as well as anybody else out there does, you use the bathroom basically of what you look like. There's nobody out there trying to stop you. The only exception, and I've had to do this, and you probably had to, you can take a kid of the opposite gender when they're young into another bathroom. Otherwise, nobody cares, right? Like public bathrooms, we have no issue. But the NBA decided, hey, we have to have a voice here. We have to stand up. And once you decide that you are going to stand up there, and once you decide we're going to eliminate the use of the word owner because it's racially insensitive, I'm sorry, you can't go to China and basically disavow the First Amendment rights of somebody for coming out and saying they're in favor of democracy, as I said earlier, because to me, that's like saying you're in favor of clean drinking water or you're in favor of the ability for kids to go to school. Like, these are not debatable issues. The world is better the more democracies there are, just like the world is better the more clean drinking water people have or the more vaccinations people are able to get, right? Like, in general, there are certain things that are not worth fighting about. And the fact that the NBA is backtracking from an endorsement of democracy, I think to many people out there just seems like a fundamental assault upon the very basis of Americans' foundational beliefs.
But, I think I have a tendency to agree with a lot of the things you said. There's a giant hypocrisy revealed here. I'm not really sure. I mean, honestly, I don't know what I'm not really sure what the responsibility of the league is to weigh in on international affairs, but they really did step in this, and then every moment was very delicate from here on out, and mostly everything they've done is to protect their money, which you expect corporations to do, but of course they've taken a lot of social stances at home. So it does reveal a giant hypocrisy, it can't be argued, but the amazing thing is, like the really amazing thing to me is that this went away. I mean, did people move on to the next thing? We're idiots. We're like children. We just run to the next shiny thing. And we want the next toy that's advertised on TV. I mean, we're stupid people. We just move on to the next story. This was gone. People were worried about Anthony Davis's thumb more than they were worried about this. And LeBron thought that he was a brilliant enough diplomat to put it to bed with the NBA media last night. I mean, what an enormous dumbass. That is really what jumps out to me. That LeBron James had to step to the world stage, basically step to the podium at the UN and say that, something that not even the dumbest ass would say that represents any country on earth, that's not like North Korea or China or Iran. Who would say that? Hey, nobody knows what China, it hurt a lot of people what he did. What an idiot. Oh, geez.
It is really funny to think about that. I'm trying to think of like the sports equivalent of what that would be. That would be like somebody being like,
my radio partner texted me last night. He could have gone up there and made a fart noise, and it would have just gone over better. They would have said, hey, LeBron, what do you think about the whole Daryl Morey thing? And that would not have been as bad as what he said.
Oh, that's actually so true. He could have put his hand under his arm and made the fart noise with his arm, and people would have been like not as upset as what he actually. That's actually really, really funny.
I got to go to. Just said, he could have really done any.
There, that would have been a better statement than what LeBron did. I got to go. I got to do a break, Petros. Appreciate it. LeBron James walking the Communist Party line. If you're just waking up and you didn't hear it last night, LeBron finally weighed in on the Daryl Morey tweet supporting democracy in China. This is what he had to say. I'm going to stop it after each sentence and eviscerate him for his stupidity. Let's begin.
We we all talk about this freedom of speech. Yes, we all do have freedom of speech, but at times there are ramifications for the negative that can happen when you're not thinking about others and only on your own thinking.
Daryl Morey was actually thinking about others, LeBron. He was speaking out in favor of the 1.4 billion Chinese people who don't have the same basic human rights that you and I do because they're a part of a communist dictatorship. And in fact, Hong Kong is protesting to ensure that they maintain the same democratic rights that they have right now because China is trying to take them away. So contrary to thinking about himself, Daryl Morey was actually thinking about 1.4 billion Chinese people who don't have the same human rights as you and me. Continue.
About yourself. So I don't want to get a word or sentence feud with Daryl Morey, but I believe he wasn't educated on the situation at hand.
Pause. Daryl Morey wasn't educated on the situation at hand, despite the fact that Daryl Morey went to Northwestern and MIT. LeBron James, you graduated from high school and have not proven yourself to be educated on anything in your entire life other than basketball. So I'm sorry, if you have to ask me to choose who's more likely to know about the situation in China, an MIT and Northwestern educated scholar who's one of the most brilliant people in the NBA, or LeBron James who went to high school, I'm going to go with Daryl Morey. Continue.
And he spoke, and so many people could have been harmed, not only financially, but physically, emotionally, spiritually.
Pause. The only word that matters there is financially. LeBron James could have been harmed financially, so could the NBA, because China doesn't allow freedom of speech. But everything else that you said in that sentence, physically, spiritually, emotionally, it's totally made up. No one was actually in danger in the NBA based on what Daryl Morey said. The people who are in danger, in fact, physically, emotionally, and spiritually are all Chinese because they don't have the same religious freedoms, the same freedom of speech, the same basic human rights that all of us have. And the people who are really in danger emotionally, physically, and spiritually are the protesters in Hong Kong right now who are being beaten up, the 1 million people who are Muslim and are in concentration camps, and the regular people who disappear in China when they dare question the government's story of the world. Continue.
So just be careful what we tweet and we say and what we do, even though, yes, we do have freedom of speech, but there can be a lot of negative that comes with that too.
LeBron's right. There can be a lot of negatives that come with freedom of speech. For instance, when you have freedom of speech and you speak as LeBron did, there's no longer any fig leaf to defend your intelligence. You can look like an idiot when you talk uneducatedly about subjects in which you are unfamiliar and unaware, and also when you are willing to sell out your entire country in order for Chinese communist dollars like LeBron James is here. Here is the simple truth. LeBron James got offended last year, and all the woke sports media defended your king, LeBron James, last year when he had the gall to be told to shut up and dribble. When he weighed in on political issues and he wasn't very smart about them, he got told to shut up and dribble. And LeBron was utterly offended by that idea. How dare he be told to shut up and dribble? Guess what? LeBron James, in his comments last night, told Daryl Morey, the Houston Rockets GM, to shut up and GM. LeBron is not even smart enough to understand that what he said is the exact same thing that he was so upset by last year. He told a man who has a job in the NBA to shut up and only do his job in the NBA, just like he was told to shut up and only do his job in the NBA because he wasn't educated enough on political issues. LeBron James, he ain't a king. I'm not even sure he's a serf. He definitely ain't very smart. That was embarrassing. It was a disgrace. The NBA should be ashamed, and so should LeBron James. This is OutKick in America, by God.